Hi, everyone. Just as an FYI, we'll be starting in a minute or two. Okay, well, it looks like most people have joined, so we'll get started now. So hello, everyone, and welcome to today's discussion of WMS implementations and the steps that you can take to reduce deployment risk without missing your timelines. Over the past few years, we have seen WMS shift rapidly to SaaS and cloud-hosted delivery. And in addition, the pandemic necessitated certain changes to implementation methodologies. So companies must now reconsider some approaches to things like functional gap analysis, integration architecture, and risk management. My name is Paul Patton. I'm VP of Marketing at Cycle Labs, and I'll be moderating the panel today. I've been working in the warehouse system implementation space in various capacities for about 15 years. So I'm very passionate about these topics. And like many of you in the audience, I've been working with warehouse systems since the days of T1 lines and on-site data centers. I'm thrilled to be joined today by two industry veterans, Josh Owens, CEO of Cycle Labs, who is the maker of Cycle, a continuous test automation platform built for supply chain execution systems, and Alan Prillaman, SVP of Client Services at our partner Open Sky Group, a leading services provider for supply chain execution technologies. Before we get started, I want to take a few moments to let you know that the initial conversation will be 30 to 45 minutes, and we will be recording the session. So if you're not able to stay for the entire time or want to share later with your peers, we will be sending it out afterwards and also making it available on demand on our websites. Anytime during the panelist conversation, feel free to submit your own questions through the Q&A at the bottom of the window, and we'll do our best to cover them. We will also be sending out a handful of polls today to give the panel some context. And we'd like to start that out now by asking you what your typical project role is so we can color our answers a little bit. And that should be coming up momentarily. So with the admin out of the way, let's get started by having Josh and Alan properly introduce themselves and their companies. Josh, you want to go first?
Hey, good morning, Paul. And firstly, thanks to Alan and our partners at the Open Sky Group for the opportunity to spend some time together today. My name is Josh Owens. I'm a founder and the CEO at Cycle Labs. I've been deploying enterprise supply chain systems for about 17 years. And at Cycle Labs, as Paul mentioned, we build test automation platforms designed to orchestrate and perform testing on enterprise packaged software solutions. We focus specifically on customers in the supply chain space who power their mission-critical business processes with enterprise packaged software solutions. And we help our clients move from a culture of change avoidance and legacy software systems to one where they can view change as an asset. We help them deploy faster, reduce time to value, and stay current with a higher level of quality and leaner solutions. And Paul, I'm excited about our conversation today.
Great. Thanks, Josh. Alan, do you want to introduce yourself in Open Sky?
Yeah, thanks, Paul. And I reciprocate the thank you to our partners at Cycle for having me here today. And thanks for all the participants showing up and having interest in what we have to say. Hopefully you'll find it interesting today. But nonetheless, I'm Alan Prillaman, Senior Vice President at Open Sky Group. I've been in industry for a little over 32 years at this point. So I'm telling my age a bit, but been doing it for a long time, implementing various systems from manufacturing systems, WMS, TMS, et cetera. So a bit about Open Sky. Open Sky is a consulting firm. We're headquartered in Raleigh, North Carolina, and we've been in business since 2006. We just celebrated our 17th anniversary actually on Valentine's Day. So our core focus and competency are the design and implementation of supply chain execution software, specifically WMS, TMS, and labor management systems. And our teams have successfully completed a bit over 1,000 supply chain software projects since 2006. So we've got some experience under our belt. We've been recognized 5 times as Blue Yonder's top channel partner in North America. And our firm holds an advanced accreditation status for Blue Yonder WMS, and we're accredited status for TMS. And from a size perspective, we have approximately 100 full-time global employees. Those employees are spread across North America, UK, India, and Pakistan. And we have a contractor pool of over 20 folks that we leverage on an as-needed basis. We also, from a global perspective, we cover the APAC region with a joint venture that we enjoy with Open Sky Pty, and they're located in Australia, and we have approximately 15 consultants that work out of that office. Now, beyond, we pride ourselves on being what we call a full service provider. We mentioned before, we have a dedicated WMS, TMS, and WLM practices, but we also have an infrastructure team on staff who provide support for traditional on-prem solutions regarding application installations, database tuning, et cetera. We also have a managed services team to provide post-implementation tier 2 level support on a 24/7 basis, after implementations are completed. We also have a software services team whereby we create internal tool sets for our implementation teams to increase time to value, as Josh said before. We increase time to value, we increase implementation accuracies, et cetera. And we also create add-on applications, 2 of which we have right now that's commercialized is our client billing system, which is specific to our 3PL partners. And we also have a portal system that we also offer. Now, this year at ProMat, a little bit of a teaser, we're launching a new product that's going to be focused on business analytics and visibility. So if you want to learn more about that new launch, come by our booth at ProMat. And of course, last but not least, we partner very closely with our partners at Cycle Labs as resellers and service providers for their automated testing solution. And one last little plug before I get off our company introduction. Open Sky, we are launching a new website at the end of this week. So I would encourage everyone to check that out on Friday. We're excited about it. It's a totally new makeover. So if you guys have seen it before, it's going to be totally different. So check it out on Friday. So back to you, Paul.
All right, I didn't know about the website. That's exciting. So we're happy to have you guys as a partner and have you here. So why don't we start digging in? All right, there we go. Okay, so to sort of set the scene, we've been seeing an amazing amount of innovation in the supply chain space in the last few years. And first we had the Amazon effect. I mean, honestly, that feels like so long ago that we were all talking about just the Amazon effect. But then things accelerated even more during COVID. And so against this backdrop of general disruption, how have you two seen WMS implementations change over the last 5 years?
Well, Paul, from my perspective, I've seen a very large migration towards SaaS-based solutions, right? Traditionally, moving away from traditional on-prem solutions. just a big push from software providers moving toward those models, and clients have a greater interest as well to subscription models. Now, what that also drives as an add-on change is as they migrate towards SaaS, I guess, platforms, they have a renewed focus on trying to stay with standard product functionality. So traditionally, people would heavily customize systems, right? So that mindset has changed quite a bit over the last 5 years, trying to stay current, utilizing standard product features and functions, thinking more strategically, et cetera. So, and that also leads more towards focus on a template-based approach for our partners or clients that have multiple sites in their network, right? They're very focused on creating that standardization through a template to increase time to value, doing multi-site deployments, creating standardization across their overall networks. And also that standardization leads into and supports the use of automated testing solutions, as if, what our partners at Cycle offer. So Josh, you want to add on anything there from automated?
No, I completely agree, Alan. I think, we've seen this concept in our space of sort of standardization versus customization ebb and flow over the past couple of decades. And as you've pointed out, I think what we're seeing now is really a pushback to standardization and a templated approach. And I think there's probably a variety of reasons that support that shift. I think when I think about it, I can really contribute it to the swing this time to a few sort of what I would call macroeconomic factors. The first, Paul, I think you hit on it. You called it the Amazon effect, but I think about it as consumer expectations, right? Truly, Amazon has sort of set that bar. Same day and next day delivery, when you think about direct to consumer, is just standard, right? We have to be able to do that. And they've led the supply chain innovation in a number of other ways. I think also the pandemic has taught us that if there's anything we can count on, it's change, right? And so we have to make sure that our systems are flexible and resilient in addition to efficient. And so I think standardization and templated approaches are a big part of making sure that we can achieve sort of that flexibility. But I think, maybe the most pressure is coming from software vendors. And I think, Alan, you alluded to this, like most providers, there's a lot of pressure for clients to move to these cloud native versions of the software solution, these models. And that just simply requires more commonality, right? More standardization. But it certainly also requires trust in an upgrade process, and that allows customers to accept changes in these systems faster. But I think, additionally, just practically speaking, we've learned that if each distribution center in the network operates dramatically uniquely, it just creates challenges that can prevent us from uniformly making streamlined decisions for our entire supply chain business. So there's just simply economies of scale that you get when you take that templated standard product approach that aren't afforded when you have so many unique processes. But I think trying to stick to a template also gives us an opportunity to evaluate unique processes and decide, if the uniqueness or the nuance in that process is worth the added effort to build it and maintain it over the course of time.
Okay, thanks. So you guys have already introduced a few things that come along with this shift to SaaS, the templates, the standardization, but continuing down to where that's coming from, how have you guys seen stakeholder priorities and executive mindsets shift with the SaaS transition and the changing consumer expectations?
Sure, I can start with that one, Alan, if you will. But I think, in short, Paul, my answer to that would be, I think we're seeing, I've experienced CIOs and VPs of supply chain take, let's call it a longer term perspective, a longer term outlook on the decisions they're making. Because I think, as I just mentioned, I think we're seeing flexibility has become a critical aspect of supply chain strategy. And so in the past, we might look at a go live or, sort of cut over to a new system as sort of the finish line. But I think these days we have to think about that as a starting line, right? All of the work that we do to get to that sort of milestone cutover is important, not just for the go live, but for the ongoing effort of staying up to date and continuing to pay attention to what's changing in the world around us and ensuring that our businesses, and then by proxy, the systems that support them, are designed to adapt. So in the past, we maybe focus on what you might have called a technical upgrade or just keeping processes the same, right? We would engage in these large scale projects with a large effort of just trying to recreate our existing processes for the sake of like a perceived efficiency, right? What we do, and this is how we get efficiency. But I think doing that oftentimes pushes inefficiency into other parts of the business because it makes it harder for the IT teams to stay up to date on the latest version of this software and things like that. So I think what we've seen is the ability to stay up to date on the modern solutions without fear of introducing change is critical, right? If anything, like I said, that we've learned, it's the change is constant. And so CIOs and VPs of supply chain, they just have to figure out a way to solve this challenge of staying up to date more regularly. And so because of this ability to change and adapt is not really a luxury in 2023, or excuse me, not really an option in 2023. It's a luxury. And so it's a requirement, and organizations focused on defensive strategies are changing or adapting only when they have no other option. They're not going to be the organizations that win today, right? It's organizations who are focusing on an offensive strategy to change and innovation. I think it's those organizations who we will see as the ultimate winners.
Yeah, if I could add to that, Josh, I mean, I think you're exactly right. You know, they stakeholders are thinking more strategically, is how I would classify it, right? To your point, as they migrate to SaaS, they're looking at the long-term effect of that because, you know, traditionally folks would get behind on their upgrades. It wouldn't stay current, right? So as they move towards a SaaS solution, people understand the fact that they're looking at a long-term total cost of ownership versus a short-term total cost of ownership, which is important, right? And from an operational standpoint, they're really driving that down strategically to create the templates for those high velocity deployments, but also creating that standardization across their operational site so they can better measure performance, right? Because traditionally sites would have varying processes across their sites. You know, the GMs would drive very unique solutions. As they migrate towards these templated approaches and standardized processes, they can truly measure performance from site to site and drive productivity improvements across their sites. So that's another thing that we need to be aware of, and I think that's a big shift in dynamics, is thinking more long-term strategically, staying current, enjoying the new features and functionality that's comes with those version upgrades, et cetera. So that's my perspective as well, Paul.
Okay, so it sounds like it definitely sounds like the leaders and the project sponsors are looking further ahead, but are there project roles or functions in WMS projects that are still being overlooked or underestimated?
Yeah, Josh, I'll take this one to start with. From my perspective, Paul, I would say that change management gets shortchanged quite a bit, right? So change management can have a different definition to different people, but the way I would classify change management, it's more widely scoped, right? It includes your testing, it includes your training, but more importantly, it includes making sure that your project charter is defined appropriately and the message is getting out to the people. And really what I'm driving at is going back to the shifts into the dynamics of the market. People are focused more on keeping with standard product features and functions wherever possible, right? That's typically at the leadership level, right? When we're selling or CIOs or directors of operations are making a key decision to bring on a new technology stack or new technology software like a WMS or TMS system, they have in their philosophy, their charter, their personal charter to keep a standard product. Sometimes when that makes it down to the operations teams, they have a habit of trying to recreate legacy functionality, legacy processes. And change management really needs to be included, not at the back end of a project when you get to UAT, which happens at times. That's too late, right? We like to see change management happen at the front end of a project, so they can understand the charter, they can help manage that charter along with the project management team, make sure they communicate to the people that are actually providing us the requirements and working with us to confirm the design of the system, right? The message we always like to deliver is that anytime that you're implementing a new system, such as a WMS, TMS system, is that it's an opportunity, right? It's an opportunity to really assess your overall current operational processes, the features and functions that the new system is bringing you. as opposed to taking the easy way out and just replicating what you've always done. Because at the end of the day, we'll ask the question, if you just replicate your current process, what you're doing today, what have you actually gained at the end of the day if you implement a new system, right? What's the benefit, right? And if they introduce the heavily customized solution, that really makes it difficult for them to stay current going forward and achieving, you know, additional features and functions in newer versions. So again, a lot of people don't talk about it, but I'm a firm believer that change management should be start at the beginning and work all the way through the end of the project to make sure we all stay on track with the charter and sending the right message and selling the idea to the people that are going to be using the system of its benefits. So Josh.
Yeah, listen, Alan, you're speaking my language. I think that's why we love working with you guys. When an organization can prioritize continuous improvement, change management is just massively important, right? It is the priority because it truly takes a cultural shift. And we have to remember that often starts with change acceptance, right? Doing the hard work with the people is critical to the success of these projects. We have to help these, let's call them operational veterans, right? The folks who are out there living and breathing these processes every day, understand the benefits of the change and have important conversations with them early in the process. And when I am deploying systems, after spending time with the project teams up front, I like to go out on the floor and talk to some of these folks in the facility. And I think that's where you can generally find, let's call it the reality, right? Sometimes you realize they're the ones with the best ideas on how to improve, and it helps us as the implementers also understand, what might benefit them, or maybe where there's something that they may have insight into that we missed in our conversations. But certainly when you think about people, process, and technology, people come first for a reason. And I think, additionally, from a Cyclelabs perspective, we're seeing the addition of QA leaders to project teams. I think traditionally we think about testing as a cost driver in these projects, like a necessary evil, if you will, right? Just something we have to deal with to accomplish the actual goal that we have of getting this software into production. But I think with a need to change more often, and a desire to stay current, we're seeing that organizations are investing in QA leadership. We're seeing the best organizations give QA a seat at the table earlier in the project, and when they prioritize QA, it creates a massive ROI in cost avoidance. But I think also we're seeing it create a faster time to value for these projects. And so, like our partners at OpenSky are a great example of this. When we have someone at the table helping us identify testing challenges earlier in the project, ensuring our business processes are understood by testing teams, we can now build testing infrastructure and automation to our projects earlier, automating and scaling testing, which just greatly reduces risk.
Okay. Yeah. So it's, you both have been, you're both definitely have identified standardization as a theme with risk reduction in modern WMS implementations, but many companies still believe, initially at least, that it is less risky to the business to reproduce the processes they have used for years. We all have gone through this through implementation. So that inevitably leads to a lot of custom technical solutions. So what do you guys think is behind this disconnect, and how would you explain this approach to clients?
That's a conversation, Paul, that we have virtually every project, right? So put it in perspective, with my first 22 years, I was a customer, I was a user, right? So I've been there and done it, right? I've had my hands on it, I've implemented systems, I made the mistakes. A lot of people that work in industry, that's, they've worked in their role, their company for 10, 15, 20 years, right? And the way they run their business is all they know, right? What they're very comfortable with. And it is uncomfortable thinking about doing things differently. So it's really our job is to make sure customers understand that first and foremost, we're not here to introduce any unnecessary risk to the business, right? And I guess the secret sauce is to making sure that you properly marry up the features and functions that are available in the system out of the box, right, to satisfy true business critical requirements, right? And being able to communicate and convey to the client that we understand what the ultimate objective is, right? What you're trying to achieve. And there may be different options of getting from point A to point B and reaching your objective. using various options that are available within the WMS that we're delivering, right? As opposed to the way they've done it before. So, it is a bit, it's a bit, and this comes back to the change management, making sure that you have a skilled individual that can deliver that message and communicate that to the people, right? That it's different than what you've done before. Your processes are different, but you're still delivering the same end result to the customer. And when you talk about minimizing risk, if you do that change management well, you identify a viable option using standard product that may be easier in some cases, may be more streamlined, that they just haven't considered because they can't see the forest from the trees because they have the you've always done it this way mentality. And again, it's not any type of knock on anyone, right? Because I've done it, right? I've hold my hand up, I've done it. But it's just people don't understand what may be leveraged out in industry, because as consultants, right, we have the ability and the benefit of being able to work with multiple clients, multiple sites across multiple industries, and we see other processes, right? We see other things work. And the risk is if they do try to introduce heavy customization to a system, that risk is very real, right? That's more real long term, from a system performance stability, having the ability to stay on the upgrade path, than it would be trying to deal with and identify true business requirements and maybe modify a process to, again, satisfy true business requirements. So that's a key message. If I sum it up, Paul, is that we always tell our clients, we're not here to, technology is there to support your business, right? Not have you not run your business, right? So that's a key message. And we always have to lead off with that. So Josh, you have anything to add?
Yeah, I love that. I think, as a builder of a technology solution, it may sound funny, but oftentimes what we start with is, the best way to attack, business design and quality assurance is through refined communication and collaboration up front. Like it's mind blowing to me how often during a go live, when we have, a bug or a miss that really was just some type of miscommunication early on in the project, right? So having better, deeper conversations across what I would consider these three primary stakeholders in business, IT, and quality assurance up front can really save us a lot of time by digging deeper into these conversations, approaching it with a special curiosity, digging one level deeper and making sure that we truly understand what's important to the business, that we understand the most efficient way to configure our system to meet that requirement, and that our QA person's there to understand the repercussions of any system changes and what that might mean to other existing processes. So I think you nailed it. It goes back to standardization. It goes back to change management. It goes back to communication and collaboration up front. I think, just Paul, as an aside, when I think about upgrade strategies, this is just an anecdotal thing. I'm curious if we're going to see eventually the idea of an upgrade kind of become a thing of the past, right? We've talked about software vendors and OEMs striving for versionless releases, right? A cloud native architecture, centralization, and hosting, things like that. And as we sort of progress into that world, changes are going to be coming more regularly. So again, we have to figure out an answer to that question. But I'm wondering if we'll stop thinking about upgrades in the way that we do today and start to experience it maybe more like we do in our personal lives. And I'm not saying that our WMSs or labor management systems or TMSs are going to just automatically update every day without some type of involvement. But I think we will see us moving towards a more regular cadence of small iterative changes into these production systems. And like we've already talked about, I think when we do that, it positions us for longer term growth and an ability to adapt more regularly to take those changes. So I'm curious if how we think about upgrades will be a thing of the past at some point in the near future.
Yeah, so that's actually a great transition into my next topic, because a lot of what we've been discussing has been related to new implementations, people or companies implementing new systems or different systems, but there are still a lot of companies running on-prem, and most of the options for best of breed WMS, for example, are SaaS based now. So how have upgrade strategies changed due to SaaS, and how does that impact your solution design, for example, an on-prem going to SaaS?
Well, Paul, there's different flavors of that, right? Depending on what you're going from to. So for example, the traditional on-prem upgrades that most of us on this call are probably most used to, when you're going from a version upgrade in an on-prem to on-prem, it's the most likely scenario is that's a very heavily customized solution. The client is probably multiple major version releases behind, right? Almost to the point that it could probably be considered a new implementation versus an upgrade by the time you're maybe 4 or 5 years behind the curve on your staying current strategy. The biggest focus during those those upgrades are how can I migrate my current code base, my custom code base, to the new version, right? So that's, again, I won't say a lot about that. I think we all understand what that entails. The shift, however, when we're moving from an on-prem environment to a SaaS, it changes a bit, right? Because really what we're trying to do at that point is taking a look at the customized processes. First of all, questioning those, are they truly business critical or not, right? And if yes, right, how can I or should I migrate those to the SaaS environment or not, right? And the key is trying to satisfy those critical business requirements through standard features and functions. So that is a new implementation. It's not really an upgrade because it's such a major shift between where you're coming from and going to. You're really doing that assessment of trying to eliminate as many of those customizations as feasibly possible, right? Without introducing risk to the business, as we talked about before, right? Now, if you're already on SaaS, moving to a SaaS, new SaaS version, that's where you want to be, right? Because at that point, in theory, conceptually, right, going back to the theme we've been talking about, you should be utilizing primarily standard features and functions, out of the box functionality, right? You should be using a template at that point, right? And this really also plays into a scenario where automated testing, like what Cycle Labs is offering, enables you to very easily and very efficiently, regression test your system, right? So you're not years or multiple major version releases behind. You're truly in position to be staying current with the upgrades, receiving all of the new features and functions that may be in that new release. It becomes theoretic. I don't want to say a seamless process, but a much more seamless process than your traditional upgrades from an on-prem version, 4 or 5, 6 major version releases ahead. So that's the shift I see, and the different flavors. Josh, anything to add from an automated testing perspective?
No, again, I think you nailed it, right? I think if we can't get to a culture of challenging our existing processes when we're making these upgrades, we're introducing changes, then we're probably leaving a lot of value in even making the change on the table, right? I mean, we're going through the motions of running these projects, of getting these teams together, of having these conversations, of reviewing our processes. And if we're only doing that for the sake of recreating what we do today, then I think we're losing a lot of value in the reason we're even doing this in the first place. I think I would just piggyback what you're saying. I think we should approach these projects with a culture of curiosity, and just continue to ask why, right? Why is it that we do it this way? Is there a better way? Maybe the answer is no, but at least while we're going through the motions, we should do this. And I think getting to a place where we can change our processes and innovate and change more regularly is certainly supported by technologies such as test automation. That's what allows us to really explore and innovate in smaller increments, I think, because testing can often be the bottleneck if we don't have a solution like that.
Yeah, and one thing to add to that, you just mentioned that you talked about it a couple of times, Josh, about being able to take on more frequent changes. A lot of times people, and again, I'm holding my hand up, right, coming out of industry as a user, I've seen it before where people actually resist putting in a change that probably has some significant ROI to the operations, but a decision is made not to pursue that change at this point in time, right, because of the amount of time and effort it takes to test, right? And one or two things typically happen: either they don't do the change, so they don't get to achieve the operational impact, or they do the change, and guess what? And again, I'm holding my hand up as being a guilty party here. I don't think I need to regression test the whole thing, right? Because it's not going to touch all these other things, right? But how many people on the call, nobody needs to raise their hand, but I'm sure have probably not properly regression tested changes before. thinking that it's not going to cause any issues. And at times it does. So I'll just leave it at that. So,
Yeah.
regression testing does get shortcut often. Let's put it that way. It's not abnormal.
Yeah, listen, I mean, you're not alone in that, of course, as you know, Alan. I mean, I've been in those I've been in that seat before too. And I mean, admittedly, there's a little bit of excitement in saying, hey, you know what, we're gonna put this change in, it's gonna fix that problem. If it causes something else, I'm gonna fix it. Sort of this, maybe it's a little bit of a cowboy culture, but I think as what we've learned is probably the most exciting thing is knowing that you're not going to have a problem and that you can go home at the end of the day.
Right.
So yeah, that's, to me, I think that's what I've learned is more important.
Yeah, I can certainly relate to what you guys are saying. I've been in a lot of implementations where we kind of tested once we went live. So raising my hand too as an implementer, but it kind of transitions into the topic of mock go lives, because a lot of companies also think that a mock go live is kind of a replacement for some regression testing, or and they mitigate risk by implementing it as a quality checkpoint. It's like, if I, no matter what happened, I can do a mock go live, and if it goes well, go live will go well. And then we often find issues in production still. So what factors do you guys think are at play there, and what should be done to make quality checkpoints like mock go lives more useful?
Well, I'll start here if you will. And I know you've got some passion on this one, but I think, look, at the end of the day, risk reduction means you have to think about quality assurance, right? And when you think about quality assurance, there's lots of different pillars of a successful strategy. I think mock go lives, as you sort of referred to them, Paul, are just one part of a cohesive quality strategy. I mean, you need regression testing, right? As Alan just kind of mentioned there, it's just not possible without a tool or an automation to effectively understand if the change that you're introducing now has adversely affected existing business processes. And that's why we do regression testing. You need some type of scalability testing. From a performance and volume perspective, we need to test concurrency. But we also need to understand the boundaries of our systems and the application infrastructure that support them. Where is that line that says we've gone too far and the systems can't handle it? We also need acceptance testing. And truly, there is no replacement for having your business experts sign off on a system change, right? They're the ones who understand if it's going to support their business processes or not. But you also need those mock go lives, right? That physical testing of the infrastructure. So we must understand if the physical system infrastructure, and I'm talking RF scanners, material handling equipment, printers, even just the physical processes that we're asking humans to do themselves, if all of that works in the way that we intended to. Regression testing is certainly not a replacement for acceptance testing, but it can make it more efficient. And performance testing isn't a replacement for mock go lives either, but it can ensure that when we show up to do that physical test, then we don't have to worry about system infrastructure problems. We can actually accomplish the physical test because we've already used technology to vet out all the other concerns of the software itself. And so we can actually focus on the physical aspect of that testing. So I think my short answer is that you have to have all of these things. They're all part of a quality assurance strategy, a risk reduction strategy. And you really just can't rely on any one of them in isolation. I don't know, Alan, I mean, what do you think?
Yeah, I'll add to it just a bit, Josh. I agree with everything you said. One of the key things is to make sure that clients understand or align on the definition of a mock go live, right? Because we've seen it at times, right, where a client may think a mock go live is basically what I would equate to a conference room pilot, right? They go through well, first of all, mock go live is you're testing not just the system, but you're testing all of the intricate details of the processes. Everybody understands what their role is and timing of those roles, during the transition cutover, right? Data, cutting over ERP system from their traditional WMS to the new WMS, data loads, et cetera, inventory, validation, et cetera. So it's a very intricate process. And at times, right, people will, test the data transition, the cutover processes, and they'll do the UAT in a conference room setting. But for us, the key is the mock go live is actually testing to your point, Josh, the physical processes, right? Because when operations team may draw up the process on the whiteboard and they test it UAT, systemically, it may work fine, right? But when they get on the production floor and the operations team actually watches the flow and they feel it, they're going from rack to rack and they're actually doing the physical walk, if you will, they can determine that, well, this isn't exactly what we anticipated, right? And they may need to pivot a bit before they actually, cut over. We look at this as I'm a big believer in the measure twice, cut once, philosophy, right? It's better to go through multiple mock go lives if you have to, right? That's we typically plan for at least 2 mock go lives, because when you try it the first time, guess what? You're typically going to learn some things that you need to maybe do better on from a continuous improvement standpoint. So we try it again until that mock go live goes very smoothly. Again, it's all about mitigating the overall risk to the operation, right? So that's my ad.
Yeah, no, I like it. I think if you don't do all of those things, if you don't test the ins and outs of that physical infrastructure, it can be those tiny little like death by 1,000 cut problems that sidelines a successful go live. You can have the best alignment between business and IT. The software may do everything it's supposed to do, but if the conveyors can't send the proper diverts down the right lane, then we've got problems, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, guys, this has been a fascinating conversation. It's clear you guys are very passionate about it, but we're just doing a time check here. So I guess summing it up for today, what are your key takeaways for how companies can reduce risk in their WMS deployments?
I'll let you go first, Alan.
All right, thanks, Josh. Well, if I was sum it up, Paul, right? Always stress simplicity, right? Go with the crawl, walk, run approach, and try to resist the temptation of attacking too much at once. Because what does happen when you unveil these large, complex, highly functional tier 1 systems to the operations team, they can get excited and they see a lot of shiny objects, right? And they want to introduce unnecessary complexities out of the gate, right? And they go for the blue sky approach because they just get excited. So they may see some things they've asked for in the past that their legacy system wasn't able to provide, and again, they just overcomplicate it. And at the end of the day, if you keep it simple, go with call it MVP type of approach, minimal viable product, satisfy your true business critical needs, be able to receive, put away, pick, pack, and ship, right? Do it well, do it consistently, then that's what you want to do. And then you're going to be in a perpetual state of improvement after the initial implementation, right? So that's, I guess, recommendation number 1. Again, we've talked about it on numerous occasions during this call or this webinar. Keep a standard product wherever possible. And actually, I would say that whether you're in a SaaS environment or an on-prem, because again, if you keep a standard product, you're going to be in a better position to stay current and with your major version upgrades going forward and achieving or receiving those new features and functions and new version releases. So that's important from an overall long-term total cost of ownership and overall risk mitigation in your system performance and stability. And also use a templatized approach. Like OpenSky, we have our own proprietary templatized approach that we use, where we have a pre-configured system. We have predefined collateral from test scripts, solution summary document, et cetera, that we leverage, again, back to improving the overall time to value, reducing risk in the implementation. We offer that, and then also utilize automated testing to make sure the automated testing offered by Cycle Labs for that regression testing, because again, regression testing gets shortcut. We talked about change management getting shortcut before, but long term, on a regular basis, regression testing sometimes gets bypassed. So if you have that ability to do the automated testing easily and efficiently, then that's going to happen less often. You're going to have a more stable, more accurate, more consistent system. So, Josh.
Yep. No, thanks, Alan. I appreciate that, and I completely agree. I think. Firstly, you want to be working with a trusted partner like our friends at Open Sky Group. I mean, what we're dealing with here, these are complex systems. There's a lot of decisions to be made. So you want someone who's working in your best interest, someone who can guide you down a standard product solution with a templatized approach. To Alan's point, and that's what you need to stay current, right? To have the freedom to upgrade, to stay on the latest and greatest version of your solutions. But I'd also say from a Cycle Labs perspective, we're seeing companies who are winning today making quality a value driver. I think in the past, as I said earlier, we viewed that as an industry as a cost driver, like some necessary evil. But bringing QA leadership to the table earlier in your projects with business and IT leaders to have those deeper conversations is really benefiting companies that are winning today. And again, we've said this a couple of times, but while you're going through the process of a project, of an upgrade, while you're putting forth the effort to change these systems from one version to the next, do it with an eye towards curiosity, right? If you find yourself saying this is how we do it just simply because that's how we do it, then maybe take that opportunity to ask if there's a better way, right? And use this opportunity while you're already doing it to improve existing processes, because at the end of the day, that is why we're doing what we're doing.
Okay. Well, thanks. Those are great recommendations. And as someone who did WMS implementations for years, it's encouraging to me to see that we've come such a long way, and that projects are heading in a more proactive and predictable direction. So I think that wraps up the initial conversation, but we'll get into some Q&A here because we do have some interesting questions from the audience. Let's see. Okay, so the first one is that COVID made it very difficult to get everyone on site like we were used to. Do you have any recommendations for working with distributed teams across geographies and multiple time zones?
Josh, I'll take this one initially. Well, Paul, yeah, I mean, COVID affected everybody, right? We're under travel restrictions. We couldn't go into sites with some clients, but honestly speaking, from an open sky perspective, we didn't slow down. We kept gaining additional clients. Projects that were already in motion didn't stop. We actually had several projects that were implemented successfully without ever stepping foot on site, right? It was we got very proficient at using Teams and Zoom calls. So it was the next step. It was the next best thing to being there, right? Even on post-implementation support, we were able to supply or provide hypercare support in several instances with, again, Teams called. We would set up a war room with multiple monitors and workstations, and our teams would be on Teams calls, right? And, users from the client would go into the war room and get on it was open bridge. We were always there, right? So that they would come in and ask questions and provide, scenarios that they're having issues with, and we would troubleshoot it right there from a Teams perspective. One of the biggest challenges, though, is that the client, the shift has to be, the client has to take a greater level of accountability from an operational perspective in collecting the requirements and conveying the requirements to us, because typically, what we couldn't do is be there on site talking with the boots on the ground, the guy on the receiving dock, the pick, pack, shipping, folks, without being able to be there, seeing them in action, right? Where we can ask questions. Why are you doing that? Explain this process to me. We did miss that, but that requires a greater level of involvement from a client perspective, that they have the operational lead to gain that insight for us. But it's really just getting good at using the tools that are available to us from a technology standpoint, using Teams, Zoom.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, I think, Cycle Labs has actually been a remote organization since we launched 2 years ago. And I think it applies to how we operate independently or internally, as well as how you think about working with the customer, especially with the physicality of having to understand a distribution center and the inner workings of it. Alan, just simply being proactive, right? Just creating the opportunities to have the right conversations and making sure you're working to ask those questions and get the right people in the right room, whether it's on Zoom or a phone call or whatever the case may be. It just takes a much more proactive approach than having the luxury of walking around and running into those people and having those conversations when you're physically there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the only thing I'll add to that, Paul, is that we also had to become more disciplined across the board within the teams, client and us, to make sure that the right toll gates were being followed, right? That processes were being followed from a documentation standpoint, sign-off approval standpoint. So it's all about making sure that you're being transparent, heavy on the communication side, and the toll gates to make sure we weren't going down the wrong path. So I'll just add that as well.
Okay. Thanks, guys. So this is an interesting one. So it's specific to Cycle, but I think you both might have an opinion on it. Is Cycle evaluating individualized labor performance, which can be manually evaluated against an existing standard? Evaluation of labor productivity of a new solution can be an acceptance criteria too.
Yeah, I can start with an answer there, and Alan, feel free to jump in if you have thoughts or opinions. But yeah, I think one of the most exciting things about building a software solution is seeing what your clients decide is important to them and what they can do with it and get creative with it. And so we actually do have several clients now who take this platform that we built and said, hey, we'd like to use this for labor standardization. We call this sort of like an emulation or a what if scenario, right? So we have our labor standards. We'd like to, use a platform like Cycle, use Cycle to run our system, and we get those measurements of labor performance, maybe then tweak it and see if we get improvements or not. And so with a platform that's designed to orchestrate and run these systems like they are intended to be run in production, it gives us the ability to experiment sort of in isolation and decide whether or not that change is going to produce the outcomes that we believe is likely to produce.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. You can measure the the time per transaction, right, or execution of a scenario, and you can extrapolate, right, the amount of time that you're going to save across depending on what your direct labor impact is going to be, right? Understanding the number of transactions or scenarios that you're going to execute on a day-by-day basis, right? And the number of direct labor that you have, you can certainly extrapolate the improvement of making a process change and whether there's an ROI there or not. So you can do that prediction. I agree.
Great. Yeah. Okay. So this one, I know you're both of you are capable of, you're pretty vendor agnostic. However, you have a lot of expertise in the Blue Yonder space, and this appears to be from a Blue Yonder customer. But does Cycle Test Automation support the dispatcher WMS? So there's discrete and there's dispatcher. Do you support dispatcher?
Great question. The answer is yes, right? So as a platform, Cycle is technology and truly even vendor independent, because any particular solution is powered by a number of vendors and technologies. So to help our clients, we have to be agnostic to the systems they use from a compatibility perspective. And so I will say, I won't say too much about it, but I'll say keep an eye out in coming weeks for some exciting announcements around our relationship with the dispatcher platform in particular.
Okay. Great. All right. Well, I think we're getting to the bottom of the hour. So, I think this has been a great conversation, especially for for some of the attendees that might be newer to WMS implementation. So I'll just share some couple more admin items and reminders. All right, so for anyone who attended today, if you missed part of it or if you want to pass it on, as I said, the recording will be provided via email and will also be available through the Cycle Labs website and probably OpenSky's new website in a few days. And one cool thing, if you're going to ProMat in Chicago in March, you can actually meet all three of us in person at a co-hosted happy hour event on Monday, March 20th from 3 to 5 p.m. So that will be at Open Sky Group's booth. And you can come by for some cocktails and networking. And if there's any questions that you wanted to follow up on but couldn't get answers to here, feel free to reach out to us on LinkedIn or through our company websites. All right, so that's the end of the presentation for today. We'd like to thank everyone for coming, and thank you very much, Josh and Alan, for participating. So I hope everyone enjoyed it and have a great day.
Thank you, Alan. Thanks, Paul. Appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone, for attending. Enjoyed it. Bye-bye.